trying to go to Poland, but still having difficulty. Because Poland, I guess, it's the same struggle everywhere. Everybody is struggling and trying to get the Polish. We're getting closer. I'm still trying to get my translator. Translator to come. Yeah. So I won the person in Philadelphia. Maybe. But in any case, I was in Australia a couple weeks ago, and we've already seen. Look at this last year. We've already seen a lot of little miracles. Little miracles. And I came from Australia, and both of them called for us to come. When Canada called, it was like, okay, we'll come up there once in a while. We thought the priest would take over, about the box and Father and Father Peter Scott would take over. But it didn't work out that way. But Canada is a little bit closer, And it's 1 hour hop from New York City. And if you drive, it's only 8 hours from New York City, right? It's not that far. Just straight across. Maybe even less than 8 hours, I think. Well, no, we're going to go around the creek. But because of having to go around that 8 hours, if you go straight, it wouldn't be that far. If they built a bridge. But in any case, so they called Australia, and I went there in April of last year. And at that time, it was a very small chapel called, really small chapel. They have 27 people in the chapel. Maybe the total is 27 in such a big chapel. And it's actually an older chapel. It was one of those small chapels, little nowhere, that became a satellite to other places. So Adelaide, Perth, they all kind of happened off of the base. And so back in the 70s. And in any case, people treated me and said, you got to come. So what happened to several of the people in Brisbane and different places. The big worry was, what about regular Mass? Because Father Pfeiffer comes, and maybe Father Giselle comes once in a while, and then between Father Pfeiffer and Father Giselle, how do they get Mass? Well, in the course of this year, they, what do you call it, they've already gotten a lot of Masses. So I was there in April, first visit. Then Father Giselle came in July, and we said, look, we'll try to come once in 3 months. That's what we can do. I'll come one time, Father Giselle can come the other time. We'll have a Mass. I came in April, and Father came in July. The Father was able to come again. He was able to come again, but he was able to before August. And then Father Ortiz had a visa problem. So they had 4 months of continuous Masses. Then he left in February, then I came in March. So we had out of the Masses, out of those months from April of last year and March of this year, so they had Masses for 7 of those months. And then we figured that given the situation, it didn't look like that was possible. And so now, Senior Hodgson, who's 88 years old, has joined us. And what will happen is, in fact, if all goes well, he'll probably come to Kentucky. He's one of the founding great people. We're talking about Senior Hodgson, who joined the resistance when I was just there this last week, a couple weeks ago. He's 88 years old, 52 years a priest, but 40 of those years as a member of the Society of St. Vincent. He's been helping the Society of St. Vincent since 1973 or so. And so he came, and so that now he's 88, but he's actually was bedridden, but just temporarily. He's actually relatively strong. And apparently his mother died when she was 101. His father died when he was 103 or something. And they were strong doctors until right before they died. So he's got a history of longevity in his family. Who knows? I mean, he could die at 88, so he could feel over tomorrow, but he'd also be going for a little while. And even though he was in bed when I saw him, he did do Holy Week. I'm going to find out how it went. He did. I think we skipped Holy Saturday a little too much. But we did Holy Thursday, and then Good Friday, and Easter. today. So, of course, we're living in the future, so it's all finished over there. So I have to find out how it went, whether he was, because he was in bed a week and a half ago. He wants to come to Kentucky and stay there. If he does, he's going to be a really big help. Because he was one of the founding priests of the United States. Even though he's Australian, he speaks French. He spoke with Archbishop Marcel Pfeiffer in the early 70s, and he came over with Father Sanborn. And Father Sanborn was in the seminary in Armada. He was telling me about the seminary in Armada at the very beginning. There were two priests, the whole traveling circuit and Trump Seminary, which is exactly what Bishop Lefebvre did in the 1940s, or the 30s, when he started the seminary. His first role as seminary professor back in the 1930s. And then Father Sanborn about how much your hospital, but that's not what Father Zell and I are doing right now, running the seminary and going on the circuit. And if he's able to come over, even though he'll be able to travel a little bit, but what that'll do is make it easier for us to actually cover a little bit more. And hopefully some other priests will be able to come in and fill the gap. But again, they got the Mass. The same thing happened in London. The people made the choice. Because Bishop Williamson absolutely refused to say Mass for him. He would not. And that was since last year. So finally, Greg Taylor says, look, well, you come over and say Mass in June, and even if we get Mass once in whatever, I said, okay, I'll try to somehow fly from New York and say Mass there. But what happened? He said the first Mass in June, now they've had regular Masses, even though it's not 100%, I'll be going there this next weekend. But the Bishop Williamson finally agreed to say some Masses there, only tentatively, but then he continued. And then other priests have come in and covered, other priests in Europe through England have come back with resistance. Other Fuchs was the most recent one. And so through that little group, actually priests have come from mainland Europe, said a Mass there, got to strengthen people in the resistance, and they continued. And so, but in each case, what's interesting, a small group made a decision without support.
And somebody was coming.
And I think that's the key element.
I was like,
You made a decision without support. And when you called me to come up here, there was a hope of there being support. But it was known that was just a hope. I mean, it couldn't guarantee. It looked really good for the stuff. They were so close. I thought he was at the edge of the edge, and he jumped. Somehow there was a bungee cord or something. Right? Going doing. Somebody tied a bungee cord to his foot, but he came close. I couldn't see him when I was in Australia, and I didn't see it, so he wasn't really interested. But I think he still hasn't gotten to that point of being completely violent against us. But there's a slide going away and away and away. And Bishop Tissier apparently just said last week, he told somebody, someone connected with the Boyle family, he told them, the Dominicans, the Boyles, have one priest, and the Dominicans, and other priests, and so what do you think about the Dominican statement? Bishop Tissier said, oh, it was a mistake, they should never have said that. So Bishop Tissier is it's like a spiral, the same Bishop Tissier that told me last year, first he told me I changed my position. That was in September of last year. That was phase, and in fact, we got a convert in France because of him, because in January of last year, he said more or less that to the head of the Knights of Our Lady, who was very much in the don't do anything club, previous to that point. And when you saw Bishop Tissier say that, what do you mean? We can have an agreement. He said, oh, I can't. Bishop Tissier, they were standing behind, many people were standing behind Bishop Tissier. Tissier decided not to shoot yet. Remember, in August of 2012, Bishop Tissier told Father Giselle, you don't shoot, you're not the captain. You wait for the captain to say shoot. And then Father Giselle said, okay, because when the shepherd doesn't defend the flock, the next line of defense is the dogs. And so we're going to be barking, and when you want to come and join us, come and join us. And so Father Giselle just, Bishop Tissier wasn't very happy. But he said, at that point though, he was, I'm going to fight, wait. Then later, it was, I'm going to fight, but when there's a deal. And then later, if there's a deal and we get enough conditions, then I'll fight. Now he says the deal can be a good thing, And Archbishop Pfeiffer was wrong when he said, we can't talk to Rome without a fight. Then the Dominicans make a statement. Remember their statement, that statement was wimpy. Okay? Now I wasn't even going to sign it, it was too wimpy, but the only thing I liked about it was the fact that at the end, it said, we're going to take action. I said, okay, so I'll sign it. But it was a basically, totally limp-wristed statement. Now the Dominicans signed that statement, that it wasn't clear about the crisis, and only talked about abuses and so on. It was very unclear and it was kind of wimpy, to say the least. Now, Bishop Hizkiah says that wimpy statement was too much. So you see, it's just a continual, it's never going to stop. Unless there's a miraculous intervention of some kind. Yes, that's some kind of a miraculous conversion. We see the slide continuing. Meanwhile, because everybody knows Bishop Fillet is going to make a deal with Rome. Get used to it. It's just a fact.
Angelus is open about it now.
Oh yeah, the Similin. I didn't see the Angelus, but is the Similin's articles in there? Or another one?
Yeah. Yes.
We must make a deal with Pope Francis as soon as possible so that we can give him the treasure of our truth.
That's right. If anybody wants to got copies of Bishop Williamson's Kyrie eleison, and Bishop Williamson addresses those 5 points.
Right.
Yeah, so
Oh yeah, he does. That's right. He does.
Yeah, I'll distribute it. Yeah.
That's Father Simolin. Father Simolin was the Simoulin. Father Simolin is a French priest who was a paratrooper. He was a paratrooper in the French paratroopers, and he was the rector of the seminary in Econ. My brother was there. He was the rector at the time of the consecrations in '88. And when I visited the seminary, he was still the rector. It was at the end of his time. When I came there in '93 as a deacon, he was still there. And then somewhere around that time, he stopped being the rector. And they made a new rector. And since then, he's been kind of just running a priory or whatever. But he's like a mouthpiece. He doesn't have any official positions of authority in the society. He has a moral authority because he used to be the rector of the seminary. Like Father Scott, like Father Peter Scott. He was a district superior. He was the rector of the seminary in Australia. So even though he's just a prior in whatever, what's the place near Toronto, whatever it is, this place over here, where he was a prior. What is it? What is it?
Transfiguration.
Transfiguration. What's the city though? We always call it by city.
Toronto.
No, he wasn't in Toronto. He was in Kitchener. Yeah, he was in Kitchener. Father Scott. Yeah, no, he wasn't in Etobicoke. He was in So, so even though he was just a prior of the place, he has a certain authority because of what he had. But the Similin like that, because he was the rector. So when he speaks, even though he's just another priest of the society, strictly speaking, he was just a prior of runs a little organization, whatever it is, he has a lot more moral authority. So he kind of speaks kind of in the name of the society. And he says there, we have the treasure of truth. Because we're still willing to give some criticism to the council. Whereas the fraternity of St. Peter, they won't criticize. Which is actually false. That's not true. The fraternity of St. Peter does criticize the council. They do. But they only criticize the abuses of the council. The secondary problems of the council. They don't criticize the council as essentially heretical. They criticize it just like you criticize your wife. You're mad, so you're critical, but it doesn't mean anything. It's just, you're mad, that's all. But it doesn't change anything. So that is the kind of criticism. So you can say, hey, I'm still criticizing. How come you should stop living with your girl? I'm really unhappy with the girlfriend I'm living with. Okay. Unhappy with the girlfriend you're living with isn't good enough. You gotta move out. You can't just be unhappy with the girlfriend you're living with.
It's just talking to action.
You see? Yeah, so you can't really live that way. And so that the criticism of the society, and it's one of the steps, hey, we're still criticizing. Not really. And even this criticism of the canonization of Pope John Paul II, it's not a very clear criticism. And we don't have to believe what the Angelus says, not the Angelus, I didn't read that, what SSPX.org says, and Dici says, is that you don't have to follow the new canonization. A similar argument to what Bishop Williamson gave, which is that they don't intend to be infallible.
Oh yeah, because everything's evolving.
Yeah, because everything's evolving. I kind of think that's a bit of a weak argument. But at the same time, that's the argument. I think it was a similar argument. I think the canonization thing is, that's a question that it never even was brought up. We'll give an example. We're talking about on the way here. In 1950, the Assumption was, made a dogma of the faith by an extraordinary formula. But it has been taught for the last 2,000 years. St. Peter knew about the Assumption. St. Thomas witnessed the Assumption when a lady went up and went over to India, dropped off her sash, and went up into heaven. St. Thomas saw it, and he talked about it in his catechism classes. The church has been teaching it, and it's been a feast of the Assumption for at least 2,000 years. We don't know when the feast started, but it started before the year 300. So we've always believed in the Assumption. It's just that it was defined in 1950. When it comes to canonization, if canonization was equally infallible, then we should find canonization in the first centuries of the church. Canonization doesn't exist before the year 1000 AD. Peter was never canonized. And even you read of the saints, you read about the lives of the saints, Sixtus didn't say, Lawrence, who just died yesterday, he is a saint. He never did that. It was just the people automatically acclaimed. It was by the devotion of the people that the whole people of the church said, this man is a saint. One example of an obvious saint that was never canonized is Padre Pio in our times. And in olden times, not Emerenciana, but Margaret of Castello. Margaret of Castello was never canonized. She died in 1323 at the age of 33. Her body is incorrupt. She performed miracles every single day, like 500 miracles a day. On a bad day, she'd do a few hundred miracles, if she was having a rough day. And so she was just, and when they went to bury her, because she was thrown out of the Dominicans, she's a third order. She was too holy for the convent, so they threw her out. And so she died in the streets, but she was a third order Dominican. So the people wanted to bury her in the church cemetery. But then the church said, no, she has to be buried, because she's strictly speaking only third order. She has to be buried in the lay cemetery. So the people gathered in the church, and they were going to kill the priest. So the priest said, you know what, I think we'll bury him in that cemetery. And then when they went to bury her, a girl was paralyzed, just like Margaret was. She was paralyzed, and she was blind. She was paralyzed, she was born blind and paralyzed, and not paralyzed, but she was crippled, hunchback, and they put a girl next to her dead body, and she was cured immediately. Another was raised from the dead while they were burying her. Now the thing is that, so she's obviously a saint. Canonization is really kind of, people, her body is in the church. It's incorrupt. She's one of the incorruptibles, and she's perfectly straight now. When she died, she straightened out. No longer crippled. Only when she was alive was she crippled.
St. Margaret?
Blessed Margaret of Castello. In Italy. That was not the town she was born in. That was the town that she, I think, died in. Yeah. Her mother and father were nobles. Yeah, and when she was born, she was an ugly baby, and they wanted to kill her, but they couldn't kill their own baby. They weren't modern people yet. So they hid her in the upper castle, and she was hidden for like 5 years. And when she was 5 years old, she came out walking the streets and everything, and then they had to admit to the baby. Then they took her to a shrine when she was like 15, and then they left her. They just left her. She was blind, and they left her, and then that was in Castello where they left her.
So, Father, going back to the...
But in any case, you see, there's no history of the Pope saying this man is a saint until later on. In canonization, the name of it, I think, is a canonizing. In other words, verifying that the devotion of the faithful is accurate. Like John Bosco. In fact, one of the things that has to be proven in the canonization of the saint is that there is a devotion. The devotion doesn't come after the canonization. The devotion leads to the canonization. Without the devotion of the faithful, there's no canonization.
So people get really about the canonization.
Well, I know, I even, before this whole crisis, I've always thought that canonization, infallibility is all this derived infallibility. The church can't do anything that's going to harm souls. It would harm souls if the church said that this man was a saint and he wasn't, therefore it's infallible.
That used to happen. But a lot of the things, like when they started out in the 1920s, when they started saying, that everything is infallible. But some of the things that they say the church can't happen.
They have happened.
It did happen.
Yeah, right.
Like I once read some sort of saying that if seminaries are teaching something, it has to be infallible because otherwise they never. Arianism came from a seminary.
That's right. You see, the problem with the derived infallibility is it can expand and expand and expand forever. It's like you can make so many conclusions. Now, and it's a case I think with canonization. I remember I have to reread it. I guess during this week I was about to get my hands on some apologetics books, De Ecclesia, where they discuss what does the church mean when it's infallible. And St. Thomas Aquinas talks about I think he speaks about it somewhere in the Summa. He speaks about it somewhere because by the time of St. Thomas there were saints being canonized. And then, of course, these saints are put in the calendar on the altar. And it is true that there is something to the argument of the canonization being infallible in the sense that it's not just saying that this man is in heaven, but that all Catholics can follow the example of this man. And then also, there must be some certitude as to some saints, because if God makes a church which has its purpose to make men holy, there should be holy men in each age, at least some. There should be visible holy men. Now we find that in all ages, that there are holy men in each age who are the result of the holiness of the church. When we say the church is holy, it doesn't mean that they're saints. It means the church is a saint maker. It's a saint producer. It doesn't mean that there are saints. But since the church is a saint producer, there better be some saints produced, or else maybe it's not a saint producer. So, and that's where, again, that's one of the challenges of today. In the post-Vatican II church, we're producing devils. The devil-producing church. The holiness of the church is gone in the modernist church. I mean, look at even John Paul II. What's his miracle? Curing some guy of hemorrhoids, 5 minutes ahead of schedule. I mean, what were his great miracles? A guy in the Philippines, there's a rich guy, I can't remember his name now in the Philippines, we met him. And he was telling me he was involved in one of the miracles of John Paul II. And he was explaining the miracle. He says there was this particular guy, one of the big families in the Philippines, there's Aquinos. What's the competition family against the Aquinos? They hate the Aquinos, what? No. It's not Marcos, no, he's nothing. But families, these are old families in the Philippines. But anyway, the Aquinos have been around for a long time, and they're basically straight from hell. That's the ones America promotes, of course, right? And they were the ones that the Japanese promoted too, because the Aquinos were very ready to kill their fellow Filipinos in order to get ahead in life, and they were very wicked. And now there's an Aquino in charge right now, with Bonifacio III, whatever it is, the president right now. They wanted to verify the RH bill. But the competition family, one of them, I can't remember the name now. But he was telling me that he has a devotion to John Paul II, this guy. And he said that he wanted to get an image of Our Lady of Czestochowa. He loves the Lady of Czestochowa. So he got permission from the monks in Czestochowa to make an exact replica of the painting. And so he paid for these monks. A monk artist was there for 1 year, staying in Poland at Czestochowa, and painted the image exactly the same. Then they brought the image to Rome, and it was blessed by Pope John Paul II. Then they brought it back to Poland, and then it was blessed by the monks. It's made like a pilgrim image, right? So then the image was going to be brought to the Philippines, and this guy was going to build a big church for it. And he didn't like the new Mass, and he didn't like Novus Ordo, even though it belongs to Novus Ordo Diocese. He was going to build a Baroque church. He was going to build a traditional church, and he wasn't allowed to do it he built a museum. The museum is a church, but it's a museum. So the museum has towers, it has carvings, it has a high altar, it's a church. But he got away with it because it's called a museum, right? It's officially called a museum. And so he built it, and he said, now he's going to build another one for Our Lady. Now, the image was brought from Poland to the Philippines. So when they brought the image to the Philippines, one of the guys who came to pick up the image, they came to greet at the airport, they brought candles and thuribles, and they came over to the airport in Manila. And one of the guys who came to greet Our Lady had stage 5 cancer. And they wheeled him in, he came in, and when the crate came out, he touched the crate and he was cured of his cancer. 100% cured. Right? Now, and it was verified, a real cure, doctor verified, the whole bit, a true miracle. And he says it's a miracle of John Paul II. Now, what's the problem with that story? Where did John Paul II fit in that story? It's a miracle of Our Lady. And he touched the image of Our Lady, and this was the copy of the image. And then he has the image in his little chapel. He showed it to us, and I guess the real lady has all those jewels or whatever. So they don't have the jewels; they're going to be added to the image. And and they're going to make a shrine of Our Lady, and the monks approved of it, and so whatever monastery that is there in Chesterfield or whatever. And so that's one of the miracles of John Paul II. Only has nothing to do with John Paul II. And then the ones that they're claiming are miracles of John Paul II is basically like being cured of hemorrhoids. And also, I mean, if he's popular, but nobody considers him a saint. It's just like, it's like going to Michael Jordan's funeral or Muhammad Ali's funeral or Princess Diana's funeral. It's just some popular person died. A celebrity died, and it was interesting day, Lives and Times of JP2.
That's right.
And that's it.
He's not popular enough to go Catholic.
No, it's not. But another thing also about these modern canonizations, when you consider the devotion of the faithful, in the case of the real saints, true faithful never doubt. They don't doubt. They know that John Bosco is a great saint, right? And they know that Padre Pio and whoever else, all the great saints, are real saints. But in the case of John Paul II, there's a whole bunch of people that know the guy was full of baloney. And that he was, the church shrunk under his reign. What's his name? St. Gregory the Great says, in his, his writings on the shepherd, the good shepherd. Anyway, he has the priest being a shepherd. But he says, a priest is a shepherd. And he says, now, a good shepherd, the first sign of a good shepherd is he increases the flock. So if you give some guy 15 sheep, come back in 50 years, and he's got 15 sheep, you don't say, how'd you do that? How did you keep those 15 sheep? But if you give a guy 15 sheep, and you come back in 10 years, and he's got 5,000 sheep, and he's a multimillionaire, you go, hey, how did you do that? So a shepherd cannot be called a good shepherd unless he increases the flock. So this is one of the most basic, essential signs of a good shepherd. Now in the case of John Paul II, the Catholic Church shrunk under his reign. Heresy extended under his reign. Evil increased under his reign. And also, even the things that happened that were quote-unquote positive during his reign, when you look at them underneath, they were not positive. For instance, when he allowed the Latin Mass, he allowed it in such a way as to destroy the tradition that goes along with that Mass. And he deliberately did that. It wasn't an accidental byproduct. And you can say about John Paul II that he may very well be a sincere man. He might even be a good man on the, as far as the way he acts or behaves. But clearly, there's nothing extraordinary about his goodness. I mean, St. Pius X also, he was doing miracles all the time. And St. Pius X he did great, heroic, extraordinary acts. And then also his ability to protect the church. Remember, he got the church in a most wicked state. Cardinal Rampolla was a Mason, elected by Masons, and a church filled with Masons that was ready to destroy Christianity. Vatican II was ready in 1905, 1903. And he stopped it all. He delayed it for 50 years. Right? And so all of his acts, the First Communion, then of course his many miracles, all these things, you don't have anything like that. St. Pius V, for instance, the last Pope canonized before St. Pius X, he saw a vision of the Battle of Lepanto. And he said, while the battle was going on, he was watching the battle. And as soon as the battle was over, he knew immediately that the Catholics had won, and he instituted that very day the Feast of Our Lady of Victory, October the 7th, 1571. On the same day, not the anniversary, but on the same exact day, he instituted the Feast of Our Lady of Victory, which later on became the Feast of Our Lady of Rosary, because it was the Rosary that won the victory. He was praying the Rosary during the battle, and he had all the Rosary confraternities throughout Europe praying for the victory of the fleet of the Spanish fighting against the Muslims. And he saw it. Now that's a miracle. John Paul II doesn't have anything like that. And you look at Padre Pio, the guy was bilocating and trilocating and quadrilocating all over the place. And he was curing people every single day. Even here in America, you got Solanus Casey, who's still not canonized. Solanus Casey was a mass priest. He was ordained, 1900 or 1905. He died in 1950 or something. And he cured people every single day. He never heard a single confession in his entire priesthood because he was too stupid. He was one of the last of the mass priests. They used to have mass priests. They were ordained to say mass, but they couldn't pass moral theology. They couldn't pass dogmatic theology. They were holy, so they ordained them priests, but they were not allowed to preach sermons. They were not allowed to preach confessions. Father Solanus Casey never heard a single confession in his life, never preached a single sermon. But what he could do was he could give allocutions. Like in a place like this, he was allowed to give talks. And for instance, he couldn't talk in a loud voice, his super low voice, but he would talk, several thousand people would gather around, and they would all hear him. He only whispered, and nobody had a hard time hearing him. And he cured the sick, he cured people every single day. The priest was mad because his job was to take appointments from the pastor. But they never got to the pastor. They came to him and they got cured. He knew their souls, everything. And so that this, and he was a Detroit Tigers fan, apparently. But in any case, but the thing is that there's a case of, again, it's very simple. It's clear that he's a saint, John Bosco, it's clear that he's a saint. So even though Solanus Casey wasn't canonized, Juan Diego, for instance, he was only canonized recently. And the problem is that canonizing him is a bad idea, I think he fell down though. That flop was a flop. But it was a thud. It was an impressive thud. I think he went face first. Yeah. But I think he went face first. Yeah. So it's a good thing it was only the head, so it's okay. It wasn't a vital organ. Yeah. Kids, you can throw them anywhere. They just bounce back. Because don't they still? Is that part of the reason why they have a soft skull when they're little? If you can literally crush it in, it just pops right back out, right? That's how it gets through the canal anyway, right? Yeah. So.
I have another question. Father Pfeiffer.
Yes.
Is he?
Father Pfeiffer and Father de Merode. I'm going to try to get them both at some point to come over here, hopefully. Father de Merode, he used to be the pastor in Kentucky. He was my parents' pastor for a year and a half. A couple of years, at least a year, maybe 2 years. And there in Kentucky. Back in the late 90s, no, it might have been early 2000s. And it was around the year 2000. Somewhere around there. Maybe 2000, 2001, 2002. I think it was after 2000. But he was there for a year and a half. And Father de Merode, for instance, He's one of the great victims of this crisis of the society going on for many years. In 1999, when he came to Kentucky, he came straight from Albania. And Albania was shut down by Bishop Pfeiffer. He had baptized over 1,000 people to the Catholic faith. We had more than 1,000 parishioners.
And he shut it down.
And Bishop Pfeiffer thought it was too many. He shut the whole mission down. When Father Demerode left, no one took his place to this very day.
That's a crime.
So there we are covering these souls, and then we dump them. Dump them. And then, in fact, I was listening to. I've got to give you that talk of Father Jenkins. He goes through all the chapel. We got to get it from my thing today. I'll forget because I was listening to a talk of Father John Jenkins about 21 missions in Asia. Excuse me, 21 missions of the society in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, White Russia, and Ukraine, and Russia. So 7 countries, covering, he says, 17% of the globe, covering 70% of the Earth's surface. So a big place. We have 21 centers there. In Poland, most of them are in Poland. I think at least 10, 11, 12 of them are in Poland, and the remainder of them are in the other countries. And they have 2 schools in Poland and so on. And I think like 3 or 4 priories. I have to check the Corunum today to see how many priories that they have. It's at least 3. And they have about 7 or 8 priests there. And I was just thinking in terms of, the way they're running the missions there. It's very different. Like in the Philippines, I was just counting the missions when I was 21. Father Tim and I, we said Mass in 20 places. So when it looks, again, the missions, you get a different sense of things. We're in a mission type of situation right here. But we're saying Mass in 70 places. Sounds very impressive. But when you look at it, there's 30 people here. There's 15 people there. There's 40 people there. Our biggest is 120, or 130, something like that in the Philippines. And then there's 10 here, 9 there, 40, 30, 20, 50, 70. They're slowly increasing. But when you say 70 missions, it does sound very impressive. And it kind of is when you consider that we started with 1 faithful in September 2012. Now we've got 70 missions approximately, a little bit more than that now. And more than close to 2,000 or 3,000 faithful. But it sounds impressive when you give a talk on it, so to speak. But when you look at it in the big picture, it's pretty small. It's pretty small. Because we don't have Mass all the time in those 70 places. Like here in Toronto, for instance, there were 30, 40 people. Well, if everybody was here, it would be maximum 50, right? All were here around 50 or so. Obviously, not everybody can make it every time, we understand that. There's things that happen. Let's say 50 would be a realistic high number, right? So around 50. But then there's all kinds of other ones in other places who support us when they're not able to go to our Masses. And so on Good Friday, I had 72 people at the Good Friday Mass in the Pre-Sanctified. But in Danbury, but only 20 of them were from Danbury, from Ridgefield. We're going to kill them. We should have had 50. We got about 50 people there. But the thing is, because many came from New Hampshire, we have people from far away, from New Hampshire, from eastern Connecticut, and then from New Jersey. And so some of the people from the other places came there. It was kind of like a little bit central. So for Good Friday, because Mass is in the afternoon. Well, Mass we Sanctified was in the afternoon. They could get back before midnight, when they went back. So, but in any case, it sounds impressive. But when you look at it, it's small. It's really not big. So when you give a conference, on the missions, you can really make it look good. You can make it look really impressive. Like I remember one of the priests giving a slide, because I was there in India and I was there in the Philippines and so on. I remember one of the slides, you see this kid, right, starving, and he's going in the mirror begging, and you see these filthy streets and it's all destroyed. I know exactly where that picture was. You know where it was taken from? Fancy restaurant. I've been there, right? And so when you're sitting in the restaurant at the edge, the beggar can come up and you got great picture, right? But he doesn't show the picture. He doesn't show the other side, right? You don't show that side. You show this side, right? Makes a great, nice picture, right? And then, or you go up in the wilderness and take a picture of one of the guys in the wilderness, But they're not our parishioners, they're not our people that we're working with. You can make things look really impressive, but it's not exactly the way it is. And so they have 21 missions there, all these priests, and then they got no sort of priests. And it looks like they're working with the diocese, they're doing some strange. Well, they worked with the diocese before because the way Father Jenkins described it is that the school, they have 2 schools in Poland. One of the schools, they were both started by the diocese, not by us. But the diocese didn't have enough money to finish the school. So the society came and said, we'll finish your school on the condition you let us run it. So the bishop said, fine. So the conclusion of that is, if I understand it correctly, the way he said it, it's a no sort of school, owned and operated by the diocese, but finished by the SSPX, and we're running it. So if we're teaching these, and then I guess there's they're complaining about a lot of some non-Catholic kids in the school or non-traditional kids in the school. Well, those are issues we have to deal with, especially in the mission countries. It's interesting. These are some of the challenges that we have to deal with. It is hard to get all good, you can't get all a bunch of saints in your school. So that's not necessarily the end of the world. You're trying to teach them the faith. You're trying to bring these people from weak circumstances to the faith. So you have to deal with imperfect. We have a lot of Hindus in our orphanage, and the orphanage in Bombay, we were taken over there. We baptized a few of them, but then we got driven out. It all, was one of our non-success stories. But nonetheless, we're working on, trying to convert them. And when you're in India, there's, missionaries have been having difficulties for a few thousand years. But the thing is, so the fact that there are not many traditional Catholics there, in and of itself, isn't really, a major reason to be condemned. But when you have this situation in which you are working with a diocese, and you're teaching the kids, and then they're letting you do something, they're such nice guys.
Yeah.
And what happens is you end up being gobbled up.
Exactly.
Strictly speaking, you can't say that's necessarily the most evil thing in the world. But it's so dangerous. You put yourself, it's like putting yourselves in the jaw of the bear because he's during the hibernation period. But what if he wakes up? Right? Or what if he has a dream? Or a nightmare? Right? You're going to be in trouble. And so you see that there are some situations in which we know that in our situations, or in our battlefield, we're not ever going to be always put ourselves in perfect circumstances. We understand that. But this looks like compromise. And even though you can put a twist on it to where it's not a compromise, when you look at the whole picture, it's probably a compromise. In Calgary? In Calgary, okay, Quebec we're getting about 60. In Calgary, we had 20 the last time. That's very good. That's huge. Calgary, 20. But our real stable core group is about a little less than 15.
See, when I see these numbers, I always bring it up in conversation.
Yeah.
The one person that typically lodges a complaint for 7 years.
Right.
That feels the same way and won't say anything.
And that's exactly correct.
So you take the 20 times by 7.
Right. And that is very correct.
You take 50 left.
Yeah.
Times it by 7.
No, that's true. And that's the reason why it is a true impact. Because we have many people, like I got a call the other day, I got a call from Poland, then I got a call from Switzerland, and then of course from Nigeria, but I'm having difficulties in communicating with Nigeria. Africa is not easy to communicate, very similar to, to Asia. It's difficult to communicate. And so I'm not getting good communication there right now. But there are many people, even in the United States, there's many people. For instance, we go to these places in Canada, but we're not going to Edmonton. We're not going to. But I know with certitude, with a moral certitude, that in every chapel there's somebody.
Yeah.
But where they're in such, but they don't even know what number to call, or many of them don't even know who to call or what's going on, because many of these people, what's very interesting, Father Rostan is really terrified about the internet. But it is interesting how many people come to us who never touch the internet. They don't fool with the internet. They just don't like what's going on, and somehow they accidentally found out. It's not accidental, it's divine providence. Because one of our great difficulties is even the Mass schedule, like even this Easter Mass schedule. I don't know 3 weeks in advance whether I'm going to be able to actually make it. I was thinking I couldn't make it this Easter. I've always wanted to come here this Easter, but I was thinking this particular Easter it wouldn't be possible. But it turned out the schedule worked out on the planes. I was able to get the, because I've had Holy Week problems this week because of the seminary. And I need to make sure that Father Hugo was there with the seminarians. And I'm trying to figure out how to, at least for the main days of Holy Week. And because he can do all the singing. The most important thing is the singing, I can't, forget it. Domus Episcopum, that's about it. So he can get them with the singing, the tenebrae, and the offices, and Father Hugo can do all that with them. And it's very beautiful, and so they'll learn it slowly, They have to hear it and they'll learn it, as the years go by. And so we have difficulty, but in the end it worked out to be able to come anyway. And even though even when we come, I know that there's people that don't even know that I'm here, even now. Even people that would want to come to Mass here. Who even though we've been coming here for like almost a year and a half now, they still don't know. So you're right about that. 1 equals 7 or 1 equals 10. And so you figure like that, go to 2,000 to 3,000 people, they're talking 30,000, 20,000 people. And I'm also discovering more and more, like just today, that people are following the sermons and they're listening to what's going on, and with those people on there, and some of them are in Sordo. We've had several people come to our masses who've never been to a Latin Mass before. They've only found out because of the crisis, and they're looking for the truth, and they found about us through means of the internet, and then they came to our masses. And so there's a group of that's slowly increasing. Just people searching for the truth that have never been. One of them was at Mass, 4 or 5 of them were at Mass today in Danbury, who have never been to Christ the King. They've never been to Ridgefield. They've never been to the Hartford Chapel. Right?
So this big seminary that they're building in Virginia, right?
Yeah.
A whole few hundred men.
I don't know what the number is. Maybe that's what it is.
Where are they all going to come from?
They're not going to get them.
Unless there's something there we don't know about, right?
They're not going to get them. They're not going to. The thing is, they're going to hope that they get them. Look, they got 10 seminarians this year. That's the lowest entrance number. We had in the resistance. Remember, we only got 2,000 people. But in our little resistance chapel, myself and Father Chazelle, the young men coming to us for training in 2013. 3 in the Philippines, which 2 remain. The 3. We just count the entering. We know that the guys that enter, the majority of them don't get ordained. So the entering class, we count entering class and ordination class. And we know the majority leave between entering and entering, right? Obviously. Especially nowadays. But at all times it's been that way. So out of the 10, they're not going to be 10 ordained. There'll be 3 or 4 or 5 ordained, right? So we have 3 entering the Philippines. We've got 4 in South America, of which 3 want to be Franciscans or Capuchins, and 1's with us, a seminarian. So if we just count the seminarian, we just leave out those 3. So we have 4, right? 3 in the Philippines, 1 in South America is 4. Then 7 entered in Kentucky. So that's 11. And then an 8th guy entered a little bit later. It's 12. Now they don't all still remain. We have out of those 12, I believe 7 or 8 remain, something like that.
What I'm thinking is,
but we had 12, not including the 3 Capuchins, 15 with them. We had 15 enter with a religious in our resistance movement of only representing 3 different priests: Father Cardozo, Father Chazelle, and myself. And 15. At the same time, they have 10 enter Winona. These are signs of major death.
see, maybe there's something going on we don't know about.
Yeah.
How they want to fill that seminary. Like if
Well,
you like,
yeah.
like a hybrid mass or something, or you got fraternity of St.
Right.
Peter priests that are leaving.
Well, my dad's theory is that seminary is going to be the place where the hybrid mass is developed. That's just a theory. I don't know about that. That's what he thinks. I personally think that it's a setup for failure.
Yeah.
They're going to open this magnificent, the restaurant is open for business and nobody comes. It'll be like in downtown Phoenix, 5 Simonton built a massive mall in the middle of downtown Phoenix. And they spent like $20 or $30 million on it. And nobody came because he forgot about parking. Nobody could park. And so the people came and there was no place to park. So there was this big, huge mall with all this fancy parks and he lost everything. They opened it for business and they realized you only have street parking, no parking garages, the room for several thousand people in there and parking for 20. So it didn't work out. And they gave it to Arizona State University now. Now it's a university campus extension or something. And so, it's like anybody with a brain would have realized that that's not going to work from the beginning, right?
Okay, so if it was planned that it wasn't going to work, that means someone else is going to take possession of it.
That's right.
Somebody else pays for it.
That's right. And it was
Possession.
well, no, I think in the case of Winona, or in the case of the new seminary, it's more of a mockery.
Really?
Yes, you build this big seminary and nobody comes. Now you can't afford to pay the light bill.
Yeah. They would say.
Right. Bankrupting the SSPX. Building the church in Phoenix. Building the church here. Building the church there. Without the income. Now all of a sudden we're going to make good on the loan. And the people aren't going to pay on the loan. And next thing you know, we're losing properties. And the SSPX is selling properties just like the diocese used to sell properties.
Basically, whoever's going to buy it is going to pay like 10 cents on the dollar.
That's right. They're going to get. They can do anything with it.
What about Maximilian Crowe? Maybe he could help.
He's the one doing the setup.
Yeah.
It's a setup. Usually when the devil helps you,
Yeah.
he's got a motive. And it's generally not good. So you might not know exactly whether he's going to stab you in the back, smash your head in, or cut out your guts, or skin you alive, but being nice to you is not one of the options. It's going to be one of those other things, right? And so and I think that they're missing out on that. And then there's another factor, I think, which is when you feel you're dying, like a lot of guys are getting sick, so they join the health club, right? So you feel like you're alive still, when in fact, you're dying. And so it's a combination of factors. And then you look at the guys coming out of the seminary, they're good young guys, but they don't know what they're about. They don't know what they're for. They don't know what they're doing. They're each of them saying, like Father Goldberg was just saying last week, said they're very angry in Ridgefield about the new Monsignor who's there. There's a Monsignor who's saying masses on Sunday from the Novus Ordo. He says, I'm not being conditionally reordained. I will not be conditionally reordained. So one of the faithful stood up in the back of the church and said, well, Father, why am I driving past all these Novus Ordo churches? Going 40 miles over here, passing church after church after church to go to this one so I can get a Novus Ordo priest to say mass for me. Why am I doing that? Why should I not go to the Novus Ordo? And Father said, you have to follow your conscience. That's not the right answer, right?
There are SSPX priests that are saying you go to the new mass.
Right, he's one that said it. He didn't say it like he doesn't. In other words, they're not saying it, I think, directly. It's more follow your conscience like that. Or I'm not going to condemn you if you do. Or I'm not going to tell you you shouldn't go. I'm only going to recommend otherwise. Now, we don't condemn you if you go to the new mass either, but we say clearly you should not go. If you go or not, we can't condemn you because there's a crisis in the church. There's confusion in the world. We're not going to condemn you. However, don't go. It's damaging your soul. It's sending your soul in the wrong direction towards hell. You see?
But see, when they say that, too, no one's going to make the effort to go. No one's going to make the effort to tell somebody else. Right?
Well, yeah, what they're doing is, it's sort of like saying, I am selling Nike shoes. Now, these Chinese-made shoes are just as good as Nikes. And they're a lot cheaper, but I still think you should buy Nikes. Now, if you're a Nike salesman, you're not going to sell very many Nikes that way. Right? If you're telling the people that the other shoes are just as good, and they might even last longer than the new Nikes, but we're still Nikes. Remember, we made the shoes for Michael Jordan. And so, now our guys who wear the shoes are all a bunch of losers, but back then they were good. And so if you try that sales technique, you're going to lose what you have. And right now the SSPX is trying a quote-unquote new sales technique in which they're telling everybody, we're still right, but everybody else is right too. And we still are good, but the other people, I'm not going to say, are not good. So then why?
They're more likely to take a hybrid mask.
Yes. And remember, it's one of the questions asked to Father Rostan in 2012 by himself in a scripted interview. What about the hybrid mask? And the answer is, well, we haven't seen it yet. Too early to make a judgment. How about it's from Vatican II, forget it. Just like the Luminous Mysteries, right? It's new. It's not from Our Lady. She probably knew which mysteries to put in. Skip it. Right? And so we don't need to follow it. We dump it. And we don't even have to go through all the details of how each mystery is wrong or mistaken or flawed. It's new. It's not from Mary. Forget it. End of problem. It's just, and so that and that's why Archbishop Lefebvre says we refuse all the reforms that come from Vatican II. That refusing all the reforms simplifies things. So, and there's a reason for refusing all the reforms, because there's a spirit behind all the reforms. And that spirit that is behind all the reforms is a spirit of Satan. It's not the Spirit of God. And so, therefore, there's a good reason to reject the reforms. We don't accept what's good in Martin Luther. Martin Luther said Jesus was God. That's good. You read some of the things Martin Luther wrote, they're way more Catholic than anything a modern bishop writes. But we reject Martin Luther because he was a heretic. We reject him completely. We don't accept the good part and reject the bad part. We reject the whole thing. It's like with a poisonous cake, you can't pull out the poison. You've got to throw the whole cake away. You know that part of the cake is edible, and that's not the part that's going to kill you. It's the part of the cake that's not edible that's going to kill you. But if you had that part alone, you wouldn't eat it. No one's going to take straight poison. Put the poison in candy, put the poison in cake, you might eat it. That makes poison more deadly because you're going to actually eat it. So you have to throw the cake out.
95%.
95%. And by the way, you know that real quote? That was the good part. You saw that 2001 interview? It was translated by Roger Lambert. They did a great job translating it. 2001 interview. He said 95% of the council we have no problem with, and the other 5% was taken out of context. In other words, we accept 100%.
I had an argument with the guy in the seminary for a month or so, and he says that it's traditional, the 95% of the Second Vatican Council, that it is traditional, that people who say it isn't for the theology and this kind of stuff. But I'm hearing what you're saying, it's a mixed.
But you know what? The fact is,
this is true, but this is true also. It always comes with that.
Yeah, but that's not. But no, you cannot apply that 95% to Vatican II. Vatican II is vomit from A to Z, and Vatican II is 95% poison and 5%, the thin balloon that goes around it. Right? The rest of it's just poison. When you take out the poison, all you got is a little bit of rubber. It's 95% poison and 5% tolerable. Now, the case of Vatican II, their whole mode of speaking is different than the way Catholics speak. It is modernist speak. This kind of speak that was condemned by St. Pius X and Pashindi. The speak is absolutely unacceptable to Catholics, the way of speech in Vatican II. The documents speak in an ambiguous way at best, which means they are worthy of being condemned. Somebody gives you, if you're a general and you say charge, follow me in the battle, and they give you an ambiguous answer, you don't want to be going into that battle. They're going to obey, they're going to follow, or they're going to not follow. You see, I mean, remember what's his name, that French guy in the Vendée, If I advance, follow me. If I die, avenge me. If I retreat, kill me. That's the way we go into battle. It's clear, it's one direction. There isn't any other option for the Catholic. But that only works if you have confidence in the truth. So speaking of the truth, it's one of the good points of Bishop Sheen. Never treat the truth as if it's not true. Don't treat the truth as if it's doubtful. That's always a lie. Well, that's a good way to say it. Never treat the truth as if it's not true.
The whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Right, that's right. There it is.
The whole issue of attracting people to the resistance. Say you're on a chat site and they're constantly complaining that people are being uncharitable, quoting Bishop Williamson is calling Bishop Fillet a weasel, and say they quote you as calling them a financer. I'm not saying that they did, but if they did, the financer of the devil. Or, if there's one layperson calling another layperson a woman or a coward for constantly changing their mind and flip-flopping on their disposition towards the SSPX and the resistance. To what extent is calling somebody a woman or a coward or what have you truly uncharitable on an internet site?
Well, we're talking about a battle of truth. So if they're uncharitable, so what? All that matters is the truth.
But the accusation constantly being leveled at you is that you're the reason why the person who's using strong language. You're the reason why, and Bishop Williamson is the reason why people don't want to come to the resistance. Well, the first...
That's a lie, though. That's just not true.
Okay.
If it was true, it would be something worth considering. But it's not true. The truth is, people who don't want to come to resistance don't want to come for two primary reasons. One, because they're against the theology of the resistance. They like the liberalism. They believe in it. That's the majority. Two, they're afraid of the consequences of going to the resistance. Either they disagree with it, and they don't come because they disagree, but they can't admit that they disagree because then they're admitting that they're liberals. So therefore they resort to you're not charitable, which is just, foo-foo stuff.
Well,
It means
there was
nothing.
somebody who recently accused me of being uncharitable, using too strong language. And so I said to them, okay, I'm becoming your willing protege. Give me a viable template of what it is to be charitable on this website. And that was a few days ago. I gave them 24 hours, they still haven't responded.
Right. Yeah, you see, I don't follow the internet garbage anyway. I don't really like it, But nonetheless, at the same time, it is a tool. It's a tool.
I recently go on and sort of have a conversation going.
Yeah. So but again, but the challenge is that the real two reasons are they disagree but they don't want to admit it. They agree but they're afraid. That's it. And because if you make that move, you are going to be crushed, or you're going to not have regular sacraments, or you're going to have your kids kicked out of the school, or those are the things that may happen and have happened to some. So even though it may not happen, it may happen. Suppose that the Air Force wouldn't be so popular if this airline said you might make it to your destination. You know, that's not a plane I want to get on, right? You know, so the fact is that we want to have a moral certitude that we're going to make it. And when you go towards the resistance, you are in danger of certain things that are negative happening to you. But no one wants to admit that they're afraid, because that's like being a coward. They don't want to admit that they disagree, because that's admitting that they're liberal. So therefore, you resort to smoke.
Because calling people uncharitable and saying you
Right.
have a problem, not me.
Yeah, you're uncharitable, etc.
A
Yeah.
lot of people are waiting for the next person to make a move.
Yeah. Right. That's a bishop, but that's a porcelain dog thing.
I hear it a lot.
Yeah.
We're watching you.
Right.
But, if you go, then we'll go, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why the Chazelle calls it, it's a French saying, I guess, about porcelain dogs. Each one has been waiting for 1,000 years on the bookshelf for the other one to bark. And they'll be waiting for another 1,000 years. They'll be staring at each other and staring at each other, and then each one is waiting for the other one to bark. And that's the porcelain dog syndrome. And that is, it's a major human problem. It is.
From the pulpit, correct me if I'm wrong, but priests always said we need strong Catholic men, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That includes priests, right?
That's true.
It's not a trick question.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
So you're looking within the society, you're looking at the younger priests, right?
Yeah.
And they're not seasoned priests like you. They don't have as much experience, right? Haven't had as much time as you in your life to read those things.
But also, that's true, but remember, I was ordained, 23, 24 years, I was 23 when I was ordained, 24 years old. And most priests in society were ordained when they were young. We were all young.
Yeah, that's the reason the organization plays.
But it was a different mentality, see. I think that, we were young. In fact, now the society priests in general are much older than they used to be. Remember the 80s? In the 80s, if you saw a 30-year-old, you called him grandpa. I mean, that was like the most, you're going to hand him hearing aids and, walker, and give him his little pill box Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so that was, if you saw a 30-year-old priest in the SSPX in the 80s, that was grandpa. But these were all young priests that were going around. Young priests. And you see, I don't think it's a matter of youth versus age. In fact, it's the older priests that are the bad influence on the younger ones. They're the ones forming them. And they're imitating the older priests, which is normal. You're supposed to imitate the older priests. But unfortunately, the older priests are being a bad example. So, and they're being trained by the older priests to have a different thinking and a different mentality. So you see a difference in the younger priests. But it's not that they're younger. It's that they've received a different training.
Yes, Bishop Williamson said in the fight, none more training.
That's right.
Holy priest.
That's what they say. That's exactly what
That's
they
why they
say.
got rid of him. We see that, 10 years ago now, when we got kicked out of Winona.
That's right.
And that's when I started those changes, because I knew Bishop Williamson.
In fact, they said that in the mid-2000s. I heard that from several seminarians.
Yeah.
Bishop Williamson trained fighting priests. Bishop Father LaRue trains holy priests, spiritual priests. Yeah. He's liberal. He's terrible.
Well, yeah, he is, but how can he train holy priests?
The trouble with it is, if you don't fight, you can't be holy. That's the problem. Right. And so, so there's something missing in the equation there. Yeah.
You see it with something.
Yes.
You're interested in hearing what we think, right?
Right.
But the priests in the society, not so much.
That's changed. We've always been pompous and a pain in the neck. SSPX has always been that. But, that's true, we were right. But in the past, though, in general, the priests didn't care about the flock. That's changed.
You want to hear it, don't.
Not before we did. Now we don't. You're right about that. In the past, though, even though we were always difficult, remember the SSPX, we were always a pain in the neck. We were always difficult. But in general, the priests did really have an interest in what was going on in the family of the faithful. What were their troubles? What were they, that's actually 90% of the solution. It's like the active listening. They tell the husband, when the wife says she has a problem, don't fix it. Just say, yes, dear. Oh, that's awful. Oh, my goodness. I so feel for you. You do that crap, right? And they go, he's so wise. Right? And so that, in fact, in most troubles, we kind of already know the answers. And so just having someone hear the troubles with concern, even if they don't give any precise answers, in most cases, that's sufficient. Even though you have to give some answers. Dump them, right? So when they have a bad relationship. But at the same time, it's very often when you ask a question, you already know the answer. You're just afraid or you're weak and you just need a little strengthening. And that happens a lot in marriages, where the husband sometimes can't give too much advice to the wife, but he's still, he can still be a great support and a great help. And the priest in the parish, you can't always sermonize everybody. You're going to hell. You're already finished. And so, so you can't, there's a time for that, but it's really rare. It's, in general, that's why I've noticed a lot of the priests that, they don't know, that maybe they barely pass their theology. They mispronounce the words. They don't understand the Latin. They don't remember the classes. They barely got through. And yet, they're helping souls get to heaven. And the grace of God is filling them, and they know how to fight in the battlefield. They're just not good at explaining things. There are people like that. Even in coaching, there are some coaches who could never tell you how to be a coach. And they even don't look that great if they run up and down, dribble the ball, and the team wins the championship. You don't know how they do it because they don't have great schemes, they don't have great plans, they don't have great characters, they don't make great decisions. They just win. They just know how to do it. They just know which player to put in at one time. They just know, and they cannot explain to you how they know. So even in coaching, it's the same thing. You have all these different styles of coaches that get the same results. And it's that way in the priesthood. You get different styles of priests. They get the results of the salvation of the souls with all kinds of different backgrounds and strengths. But one thing they all have in common is they care about the souls. This element is very much noticeably missing right now. I think that's what a lot of faithful pick up on.
Yeah.
They feel and sense that Father really doesn't care.
Yeah.
They say, look, this is my house, this is not your house. It's a my, your, us, them attitude. And that leads to a revolution. The king used to be a part of the kingdom. It wasn't the king versus the subjects. They were all together. And the king could walk anywhere without soldiers, without men-at-arms, without money, and he would be treated like the king because he was the king. He didn't have to have, bulletproof, vehicles and the top-notch guards. He just walked around, and he was safe in his own kingdom because everybody loved the king, and they were proud of the king, and they wanted to be good servants of the king, and they obeyed the king because they were the same family. And then somehow the king became this god and became separated from the people over whom he was the king. And then later on, the people said, to heck with that, and they threw off the king. But that transition had to happen. We're in that transition stage before the priests get thrown off to where they're becoming like little gods.
Yeah.
Of course, the priest is infinitely above the faithful. Everybody knows that. It's true. We're above the angels, and we can make God present on the altar. Angels can't do that. We can forgive sins. Angels can't do that. So, so the priest has a power that the angels don't have. And of course, he has a more sacred place than any other creature that God created. But he's a man. He's just another loser whom God has given this grace to. Therefore, he should be respected and honored. It's correct to do that. But at the same time, you must recognize he's just another idiot in his human self. You have both sides, and we have the common sense as faithful Catholics to know that. Of course, you love and respect the priest and these sections. When you hear him like saying things that aren't perfect, you remember that he's human. And we need that combination in the Simon nature and the Peter nature, like Bishop Sheen says. They're all mixed together in the same character of the priest. But when you think you're only Peter, you're not Simon anymore. And Simon just disappears. When he comes back, it's Simon Magus, It's not the same Simon, And so it is true that these are very serious, problems. It's kind of getting worse nowadays. And then, as it gets worse, nobody cares. But I've been asking everybody, what do you think is going to... Do you think that there will be... about the rumors of the deal with Rome? Father Nelly just met with the bishop, the Pope apparently the last week or two. Father Pfluger says we're going to be in deal with Rome before Rome 2014. You follow some of the Civil article. We've got to give ourselves to the Pope as soon as possible. Bishop Fillet's statements, Dici, the mixing, all the secondary signs are there. Do you think it'll really happen this year, like the rumor claims? And if it does happen, do you think there will be a reaction to it? And what reaction do you think there'll be?
No reaction. Very little.
In the parish,
Like they say, until I see the bongo drums in the church, then I'll believe.
Right. Well, you've already heard. I've already said one. I'm never going to say the new mass. I've already heard that one from at least 5-10 priests.
None of us, we're I just moved here from Vancouver.
Excuse me?
Langley, we were from Terroir. We went around and we talked to everybody, and we all ended up meeting kind of in secret before we actually made our move.
Right.
We knew who was coming in.
Right. Well, I know that, with there was about 30 people over there in Vancouver. About 40, yeah. And I wish Brother Gerard would come over here. I know that it's hard for him.
It's expensive, especially.
Well, he's a detail-oriented guy.
Not with the ticket.
I can't put that tea bag in that cup because it's not the right color bag.
No, but Father Serious is just...
He's a man of details, Yes.
Did he show you his contraption?
I've seen several contraptions. I don't know which one you're talking about.
One in the parish that we were at, on wheels.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. The wheel and then the wall too, right? Yeah.
Pulls down with the table.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Yes. He showed me. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. How long did it take to build it? Yeah, it's impressive. You got to get electric. Get a remote control for it. You can become like Transformers. Are you a Transformer fan? What? Yeah, that's after my time. Remember, Transformers more than the eye. I see. Okay, all right.
There's enough awareness out there with people in society about resistance. It's just, I thought there'd be more than there is.
Well, I think, one of the mysteries is that the bishops have been weak. And I think God's allowed that. I believe He's allowed it just to see people stand without security. Maybe it would have been too easy if Bishop Tissier and Bishop Williamson were really bold, and Bishop Fillet was on the one side, Bishop Gallaretta, Bishop Tissier was on the other side. You could go from house A to house B, like moving across the street from 313 to 310, move across the street from the opposite side of the street to the east side of the street. Maybe it would be you wouldn't know who's real.
To answer your question, Father,
Yeah.
I've read that Benedict XVI said that Vatican II is too quick.
That's true, yes.
We didn't do fast last time.
Right.
I don't think that society will let people do this. I think it'll be a big secret that it'll be such a slow transition they won't even know it.
Well, that secret's been going on for the last 15 years. And it's been going on, and it's continuing. And I think that if the deal does go through this year, I really don't believe there'll be any reaction. Almost no reaction.
It's almost like the deal doesn't matter anymore because the people are cooked.
They're cooked, yeah.
one more priest, you could cover North America on a regular schedule and so on.
I think so, yeah.
How close are you to getting one more priest?
Far. And, you know, but again, you know, what happens is, of course, also is that, like I say, some of the priests, well, we do get help from priests here and there, it's just that it's limited. Like Father Gerard helped a little bit. Still mad at him. You know, you know, he was a lovable guy. My goodness. So, but anyway, but the exam details.
Taking the post-fall circuit, don't you?
No, not really. It's only partially doing it, and it's not making it easy for me at all. Because I still gotta fly over there, right? It's not making it easier for me at all. But if they get a few extra masses, then that's good. But it's not really helping me at all. I would say about zero help. And so, but at the same time, at least it's going out to help them a little bit. You know, these are once, and then. But because I still got to go to Bonita. Now the people in Bonita are now in danger. It's hard to get them to mass. Remember, there are certain things that work together. Like imagine that somebody covered Toronto, but they weren't going to cover St. Catharines, right? So now I still have to come up here, right, in order to go to St. Catharines.
Right.
And on that Sunday, I couldn't go to Denver. I couldn't go to Calgary. I couldn't go. You see what I mean? So in practice, it doesn't really do much. If you cover Toronto, then you also need to cover St. Catharines and Quebec, you see. But if I can't do that, then it puts me in fact in more difficult situations some days, because now I'm in a situation where I'm like, it's like I'm cut off. Now it's hard to get, more difficult to get there, because Bonita is like a difficult spot to get to. You know, it's in the middle of nowhere. So Bonita is a challenging place. Calgary is a challenging place. You know, and Calgary is much closer to Father. But they're a smaller group, you know, but that's okay. I mean, the other thing is that, you know, that these people are going for like a year without Mass. They're going 3, 4, 5 months without Mass. I'm trying to get people to not go so long without the Mass. I mean, there's about 20 people come to Mass the last time, which is really very good. It's really quite good. But there's about 15 of them that won't go to SSP Masses anymore for a long time now. And we have the same thing in Green Bay. There's a small group in Green Bay. We had 40 people at Mass the last time. But out of the people that don't go to SSPX anymore, it's, you know, less than 20. But again, it's one of those places that's just hard to get to, you know. It's not even that far, you know. It's just that it's difficult to get in and out of, you know. So some places it's not even, like it's easier for me to get to Post Falls than it is to get to Green Bay, which is way closer. It's just because of how the lanes work, how the circuits work. You know how it is. It's just, you know, yeah.
Another observation is the parents,
Yeah.
depending on their age. Right?
The parent?
The parents of priests,
Oh, parents. Yes.
depending on their age.
Right.
So, where they are in life, where they get into the traditional Mass again, right? So they have
Well, I mean, you look at Australia.
they have an influence on their
They do, but look at Australia. Father Arthur says the new Mass. Father Arthur is a priest of the Society of St. Vincent of Canada, Baptist Society about 10 years ago. He says the new Mass and the old Mass, but he says the new Mass. His mother goes to the resistance Mass. Right? So, you know, he and what's really frustrating is that Father Arthur, who says the new Mass and the traditional Mass, he's welcome in the school where he used to be the rector in Brisbane. The guy is a traitor, right? Mommy and Daddy are angry at that, right? That, you know, look, you know, I think that, you know, maybe, hopefully he'll come back. We hope he comes back. You know, people make bad decisions, you know. We hope that he comes back. But right now, he's not back. He's on the wrong side of the fence, you know. He has to convert and come back. And so, you know, we just can't. So he's an example. The parents are on with us, and he is away. In fact, I tried to meet him. In fact, when I said Mass right across the street, and he was there the same day visiting his mommy. But he went off on the. I never saw him. He went off on the bicycle. disappeared. So I never saw him, you know, and he basically disappeared, you know. But I think that it's interesting how some of those priests are seeing. I think it's interesting is those priests have been in those sort of move, like Father Arthur, I think is beginning to question.
Yeah, good for him.
Because I can't be sure, but I think he's beginning to question. Because you know, he went liberal, so to speak, even though he shouldn't have. But the society is going to always be strong, right? Now the society is doing the same thing. He's like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It's kind of like a Catholic guy and his 3 pagan friends go off to a brothel house. All of them. And the 3 pagan friends are scandalized. But he's a Catholic. We're supposed to do this. But he's a Catholic. You know? And they're scandalized. The Catholic doesn't realize that because we're all doing the same sin. But the Protestants and atheists are scandalized. And I think we're seeing something of that right now. Notice what priests have told me that they're scandalized. What's interesting is that, you know, they were kind of counting on, they were there. The society was their parachute, you know. Now the parachute's gone. And so they're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. And because, you know, remember, in the last 40 years, Archers of the Faith work did not help only the SSPX. Father Gruner points out, for instance, the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, all the adult communities have been riding the wave. You know, my brother described Father Tim. It's like we're on the ship, you know, and then they're on the what do they call it, the skateboard, what do they call it, the surfboard, you know, riding the wave, you know. So we're out there creating the waves. We're creating the waves, and all these people are riding the wave. Well, now the ship sank. What happened to the wave? It's gone. And so now they're starting to fall over and they're starting to drown. And so even though they hated the SSPX, it was a stabilizing force for them. Just like amongst Protestants, Methodists hate Anglicans, and Anglicans hate Episcopalians, and Baptists hate everybody, and you know, and so on. As long as the Catholic Church was strong. Once the Catholic Church collapsed, now Baptists don't know what it means to be Baptist anymore. Methodists don't know what it means to be Methodist anymore, and they don't hate each other anymore because they don't know what they believe in anymore, and they don't know what they hate anymore. And the Protestant churches collapsed at Vatican II. And now we're seeing, with the SSPX collapse, the indult communities are collapsing also. Their liberalism is now, they don't have a beacon, you know. They're supposed to stay like 10 feet behind us. You know, and so now we've stopped. So if they stay 10 feet behind us, the race is going to keep going. Yeah. Some of them do say the new mass. Some of them do.
Right now.
They do, yeah. Well, I don't think they're forced to, they choose to. Yeah.
Some of them said if you force us, we will resist.
That is true, and I think it's true of some of them.
Yeah, but
I think some of them are really honest that they won't say the new mass. Fraternity of St. Peter priest is talking about. I talked to one of them, and he was weeping. He said the new mass himself, and he left the new mass after he said it like 3 days or a week. He joined the Fraternity of St. Peter after being a priest for like a week. He's an older guy, older. And he said, I can die before I can say that. I can never do it again. I can never do it. I can never do it. So if he was told to do it again, he just couldn't do it. I think he's telling the truth. But he realizes he's in a difficult position because he accepts it, but he won't do it. So he realizes the contradiction.
With a compromise.
Right.
Compromise.
Right.
Are the fraternity priests watching the resistance?
I know that one or two of them are. I know that one or two of them are. And I know that, one of the fraternity priests, when he was an ex-SSPX priest, one fraternity priest says you're doing the right thing. And that it's a big mistake for Bishop Fillet to do what we did. Just like Father DeCock mentioned in the May 27th sermon, Father, the guy in Wood Shepherd, Old House Store, Wood Shepherd, that was his name, Father Alagari. Father Alagari said, don't do what we did. He's trapped because he's already, in the bad marriage, But he says, don't make the mistake that I did. Don't do it.
What do you think of Father DeCaceres' solution?
Oh, I've heard. Oh, that's a fruitcake. That's ridiculous.
It is.
Useless. But at the same time, if he gets the grace to stand up, maybe he needs to. He's so insecure that not emotionally, but mentally, he's not sure what the right thing to do is. That's a hard thing. When you don't know what. If you know the right thing to do, even if you're afraid, you at least know what you're supposed to do. But I think he's in a situation where he just genuinely is confused about what to do. Even though it doesn't make any sense, he's confused about what to do because he realizes many people are looking to him. He has that weight, but I think that weight will disappear the second he stops being superior. And I think it's already disappeared to a great extent. The time has passed. Had he stood up in 2012, a great number of French priests would have followed him.
Yes, it would have been so much good.
If he does the same thing now, only very few.
Yeah.
And if he did it in 2012, he could have single-handedly stopped Bishop William.
Yeah.
It would have stopped him in his tracks. Yeah, and that's, one of the mysteries. Because if our Cardinal Ottaviani stood up against Paul VI,
There you go.
he would have had to rewrite the Salve Romanum.
Yeah.
They would have had to delay the new Mass being implemented. They would have had to tear the book up and start all over again.
Yeah.
But he didn't do it. It was only an auxiliary bishop who was retired. Retired missionary, washed up bishop. But had it been Cardinal Ottaviani, Cardinal Siri, Cardinal Bacci, these cardinals, of which there were at least 3, 4, 5, 6 of them who were strong against the modernism, had 1 or 2 of them or 5 of them stood up, it would have changed the history of the church. They didn't do it. See, people were more sane back in the days of Daniel. When Daniel was a little boy and he said, I'm innocent of the blood of Susanna, the people were bad and they were weak, but they had more sanity. They knew that Daniel was telling the truth and the judges were wicked. So therefore they let Daniel judge the judges because the people were more sane. Now if Daniel stood on a rock today, they'd put him in a juvenile delinquency home.
They would.
Right?
They would.
Or they just kill him. And if they didn't kill him, put him in juvenile delinquency home, they'd just, he's crazy, and they would just go ahead. And the people who knew Susanna was guilty would be the first ones to throw the stone. Because the crowd is not the crowd then was not as wicked as the crowd is now.
It's like when Chesterton, he always said, Chesterton always said, give me 12 good men and you'll get a good, solid, honest answer. But nowadays, you got to find 12 good men. And it's not a normal cross-section. So you're not going to get the same result.
No, and I think you can't find them. It's just like the days of Noah. Remember our Lord said it's like you're going to be like the days of Noah? Well, one of the things about the days of Noah is lots of partying, lots of drunkenness, lots of drug, sex, and rock and roll, lots of murders, lots of violence. That was one aspect of it. The other one was there were no saints. There were no just men. Always the just men are a minority, even in the best of times. So, but when our Lord came down and looked around in a spell, there was only Mr. Noah behaving mighty well. That was the only one. Nobody else. And even among his own children, they were bad, because he would have had hundreds of children. And so in the mystery play about Noah and the ark, when it's flooding, the rain is coming, Mrs. Noah won't get on the ark because of all the other kids, right? He goes, get on the ark! I am not getting on the ark without my other children. And so Sem and Ham have to go out and grab her and drag her and bring her into the ark, right? That's in the medieval mystery play about the ark, Noah and the ark, And so she wouldn't get on the ark, and they had to go and grab her and drag her in because of the other children.
Yeah, makes sense.
So she would have had many, many other children that were bad. Obviously Noah was a good father, she was a good mother, but the world was wicked. And that's another reason why in our times, even if you try to be the best parents, kids do have a free will. The world is terribly wicked. And without the protection of grace, the kids can't make it. So we have to have a little more confidence and grace in our crisis. I think we have to have that. No way around it.
Another question about last rites. It's not a very it's late now and all that. But if one of us is sick, is dying, what do we do?
You just call us and we come.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
That's it.
So we don't go to the SSDS.
No, you just call us and we come.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, and then if something happens where it's truly impossible, then we'll come late or whatever. But we'll get there.
Sure.
Yeah. And you know, so like one guy in Germany asked me to bury him. I said, that's fine, only you gotta die first. He wanted me to bury him. You know.
You wanted to help out.
I said, yeah, but you know, there are prerequisites. Certain things have to happen, right?
I just wanted to get on your schedule.
Remember one of my parishioners in Denver was trying to schedule the burial of his mother because she was going to die in a few hours. And I said, look, let her die first. And then she said, you want it on Tuesday or Wednesday? I said, look, she's got to die first. And see what he was going to put in the paper. I said, you don't put it in the paper. She's not dead. And then she didn't die until like 3 weeks later. And then so it's not like nowadays. That's why you know they're murdering him. They never, every time, when they say your father's going to die in 10 minutes, he dies in 10 minutes. When they say he's going to die in 3 days, he dies in 3 days. That's because they're killing him. They're murdering him right and left now. I know that's what they did with Leo. When I went to anoint Leo, I've known him almost the last 30 years, you know, about the time I went to the seminary, you know, and I anointed him in Kentucky there. He did collapse. He was dying. He was truly dying, but his lungs were strong, and his wife had dumped him, you know, and she came back to say pretend like he loved him or something. He was the only person left in the family, and they were saying goodbye. I heard that goodbye so many times. And they said, he'll die in the night. But you know why they said it? He's going to die in the night. Don't worry about it. You come back in the morning, he'll be gone. Yeah. And he was gone. Sure enough, he died right on schedule. They killed him. Now he would have probably died, even you know, in the relatively near, most likely, I don't know, because he could have lived. You don't know. There's so many people that have been on the verge of death that don't die.
Like my dad.
Yeah.
What was going on?
Yeah.
Doctor was actually surprised. My dad made it.
Yeah.
He was talking. He's not going to come out here. He's going to tumble this through.
Right.
Never happened.
Yeah. And you have to watch them because they add the normal thing, you know, is what they call it, the morphine. But they've got other tricks.
Put them out on Instagram.
Yeah, and they think they're doing a good thing. And the families are, the nurse was telling me today, there was some nurse, I forget what it was, maybe this weekend anyway. But then now, so many times, the patient dies and the family's in the waiting room watching TV. And they say, get us when he's gone. We don't want to see him die. And so they watch the soccer game, the football game, the movies, and then, okay, he's dead. Okay. And so they watch the soccer game, the football game, the movies, and then, okay, he's dead. Okay.
Really?
All the time, right?